Welcome to the Writer Groupie podcast. I'm Kim Smith, the writing guru, bringing you discussions, insights, and insider details on planning, producing, promoting, and profiting as a writer. This is a podcast by writers for writers. You can find out more about Writer Groupie at www.writergroupie.net. And here's the next episode of Writer Groupie. And welcome everybody to episode 55 of Writer Groupie. I am so excited tonight. The book that we're talking about tonight is called The Charm Bracelet. And it is a book of the author's heart. Wade Rouse, a popular award-winning memoirist, has written this book, and he's using his grandmother's name as his pen name. Viola Shipman's a pen name for Wade Rouse, and Rouse chose his grandmother's name to honor the woman whose charm bracelet and family stories inspired him to write his debut novel, which is a tribute to all of our elders. It's called The Charm Bracelet. Wade, thank you so much for coming on Writer Groupie. I have just enjoyed what I've read already, and I can't wait to get finished with it.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited, and we were just talking, this is the birthday for the book, so it's a big day.
It is. You know, the first day when a book comes out in the world, it is so much like birthing a baby, isn't it? You're excited and you're nervous.
It is, and you know what it's like. It's a very, I think, for writers, you sit alone for so long and you are with your book and kind of I never typically think of kind of the end result. You know, when it's completed and then it's going to be released, you're just, I think, so engrossed in what you're writing. And so these days are always, they're exciting, but they're also a little odd to have it real.
It's very, very special, though. It's a day that you will remember for a very long time. If you're anything like me, of course, I do a lot of my own publishing now, and I just spend an enormous amount of time checking my numbers. It's like, well, how did I do this hour? Well, how did I do the last 15 minutes? It's pathetic. So if you're not doing that, well, you're just one of a kind.
And I always say, if authors say they're not, they're lying.
That's true.
So many are like, oh, I don't do that. And I'm like, go ahead, sweetie, I love you saying that, but I don't believe it. Good for you.
We want to know how our baby is doing out in the world. We want to know how it's being received. And so this is truly a book of your heart. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you, first of all, and your writing journey next?
And you're exactly right. This is a book that's very personal to me. But this is my sixth book. I've written 4 humorous memoirs before this, so very different type of writing, nonfiction and funny, and all about my life. And I also edited a dog anthology, a humorous dog anthology as well, where the proceeds went to the Humane Society. So this has been a very different journey, but, you know, as I kind of joke a little bit that, you know, this is a story that's jangled in my head for a long, long time. And it's one I wanted to write. I was a little nervous about making the switch from memoir to fiction. But it took me about 3 years to write, so I'm very glad that I took the path. I always tell writers, write what calls to you, write what inspires you. If you try to write the next Harry Potter or whatever it is, you'll probably not be successful personally because it doesn't call to you. It doesn't mean something. And I do believe you have to write what calls to you. So I did try to take my own advice this time around.
And, you know, it's so exciting when you write a story that it just grabs you by the throat and just, it doesn't matter how many years it takes you to write it. You're just engrossed in that storytelling for however long it takes. And man, what a wonderful feeling it is when you sit down to write and it just flows like water.
You're exactly.
Was that how it was for you with this book?
I would say that was how it was after a year. You know, I think I was so used to utilizing my own voice in memoir that I I knew how I wanted to start a sentence. I knew how I could, relay a storyline or a joke in one simple sentence. I was so reliant on how I did that this was a different kind of animal to wrestle to the ground. My agent said when I started writing this, she goes, um, writing fiction is like wrestling a bear to the ground. You're going to get scratched up along the way, but once you're able to get it down on the ground, you're going to know how to do it again and again. And I did. I felt like it was, this is truly a different animal. But I learned so much, and kind of after a few months of writing, what I did was really kind of stop and took the advice I also give to writers, which is I started reading a ton, of women's fiction and authors I admired, books that I loved and hadn't read in a long time, and then authors I had never read before, just really to get my arms around how to arc a novel, chapter by chapter, and then, kind of the full meal deal as well. And I did. I'm not a big outliner typically, but with this book, I really did do a lot of in-depth character sketches. I kind of outlined exactly how I wanted the book to progress. And, it's based on, and we'll get into this in a bit, but it's based on charms. So once I kind of had that structure down, it came much easier to me. But yeah, after about a year, I was able, it flowed.
Yeah, the story, like I said, I haven't finished it yet, but what I've read, the opening made me cry.
Oh.
I was just in tears. I was just like, it's just beautiful. And I'm like, why hasn't he written this before?
I, that I really appreciate you saying that. That means a lot. In writing this book, I have to say I cried my eyes out. I bawled over and over and over and over again. And the prologue was very important to me. And I had so many people say, don't do a prologue or don't do this. And to me, it really, and it depends entirely on the book that each person is writing. But for me, it really set a tone. And I think I've always had this kind of poignant, sentimental piece in all of my books. I just wanted it to come to the forefront in this novel. And, I get very emotional when I talk about my family and my grandmothers. And I'm a little tired, so if I cry, forgive me. It's, I grew up alongside them, and I spent so much time with my grandmas. And they not only inspired me to become a writer, they inspired me to become the person I am. And I wanted to write a novel that I knew that they would love to read.
Oh, yes.
And one that also honored them as well. And, the book is really based on their charms. And as I was growing up with them, I began to ask them all about the different charms on their bracelet. And, I knew my grandmothers, but the stories they told me really began to reveal complex women. And I began to see them in a totally different light, not just as my grandmas, but as, women who'd led, lives filled with beauty and hope and tragedy and love and loss and
true human experience.
True human experience. And it changed, I'm getting, as Jennifer Lopez says, I'm getting goosies right now.
I know, I do that too.
It did. It changed me profoundly. And, I always hearken back to the lessons that they taught me. It could be as simple as holding a door open for someone or saying thank you. But I wanted to write something that reminded people in this too busy age and where we fight about politics and, we watch the Kardashians, of what's most important in the world. And that's the simplest things. It's family and faith and fun and friends. And so I really got very emotional over the course of writing this book.
Well, it touched me. I mean, and like I said, I haven't read that much of it, but the prologue to me, and even though I haven't even finished it yet, is critical to the story. It sets the tone for this whole book, I'll bet.
It does, and it also for me really establishes the setting. This is a novel that's set in Michigan, where I now live the majority of the year, and based on a number of the resort towns where I live and that I love to travel to, especially in the summer. And the setting to me was as much as a character as the grandmother, her daughter, and granddaughter. So it was very important to establish that scene and the log cabin and the lake that they visit and lived on. So yeah, that was very critical to get right, I thought.
Well, how hard was it to go back into the memories of your life from probably childhood? Did you feel like you gave it a good shot? You did justice by your childhood?
I do. I do. I hope so. There were so many chapters in this book that are based largely on the stories that my grandmothers shared with me. For instance, one of the main charms in the book is a Singer sewing machine charm. And both of my grandmothers were, seamstresses and great quilters. And I just remember sitting in their kitchens beside them, watching them sew, and they made me clothes, and so many of those stories are deeply personal to me, and I hope I gave those stories justice, in baking and everything from their lives.
I think it's so cool when you write a story based on your own personal history, because nobody can tell that like you. You tell it from first person perspective. You lived it. You were there. And for you to be able to turn it into a fictionalized account of it so that you envelop us as the reader, man, that's a special talent. I really wish I could do that. Maybe I'll take a leaf from your book and learn how.
Maybe that's your next one.
Maybe so.
It's funny because after writing so many memoirs, and I was just asked this by my editor too at St. Martin's. She had asked if it would help, how much truth was actually in fiction. And, there's a heck of a lot. There's a lot in this, and I'm starting to believe, except for maybe some writers, I think there's a lot. We choose characters, whether it be, descriptions or flaws. We choose settings, and we choose dialogue, largely based, I think, on people we know, or even maybe how we would like to speak, or an alter ego. So, yeah, it's been, I have to say, I had a lot of fun writing this. And I'm currently doing a number of books based on kind of my grandmother's heirlooms that tell family stories, and St. Martin's is publishing the next one in a year from now, called The Hope Chest, and it's about my grandmother's hope chests as well. And
you're going to have to come back on the show. We're going to have to talk about that one.
I would love to.
Well, listen, how long did it take for you to write? You said 3 years. Was that like sitting down every day, or was part of that spent researching family history? And what all went into that 3 years of creating this book?
I would say the first year I immersed myself in writing this, and I felt as if I were a little bit on the wrong foot. I don't think I had a solid grasp of exactly where I wanted to go with it, and I sent kind of an early draft to my agent, and she was like, you've got some more. She was very kind, as she always is, but she said essentially, you've got a lot of work to do, and you need to kind of go back to the drawing board with this one. And I did, and I think, as you said, I did. I really slowed. I think I tell writers this too. Thank gosh I listened to my own advice. But I really slowed myself back down again. not only did I read, as you said, I began to ask family members about stories. I took copious notes. I went back through all of the letters that my grandmothers had sent. I even
Wow.
had diaries and journals that from when I would be with them growing up, from old notes that my mother had, thank God, had not thrown away and saved for me. I went back through really to try and get especially a sense of, the grandmother and the book and the charms and how I wanted to link kind of those stories. So I think I really took a deep breath, calmed myself back down, did a lot of outlining, a lot of character sketching. And once I had this prologue, and the structure of the charms, then it kind of, as you said, it flowed like water.
You know, I just love it when that happens. I have to ask you then, since you were going through their letters and so many items of a personal nature that belong to your family, especially your elders, did you ever just have an aha moment like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that?
You know, I I did. There were a number of things. My grandmothers were very open with me, so they shared a lot, but it brought back really a number of very deep meanings and stories, and I think things that I kind of pushed down for a long time.
Yeah.
One of my grandmothers had a charm of it was a silhouette of a baby boy, and she's the mother of two girls, my mom and my aunt, and she had had a child that had been stillborn, and those were things that I think I had really kind of shoved down deep inside of
Yeah.
me for a very long time, but also, pieces that play a very pivotal part in the book as well. So that was difficult to kind of go back through as well because I felt like they were with me again and sharing these
Yeah.
stories. And you talk about the 3 years, I'm a big, when I say I edit a book, I spend a lot of time editing a book. So I might be finished, but that doesn't mean I'm close to being finished. I
Uh,
read it probably 10, 20, 30 times, a lot of times out loud, just
yes.
to kind of get a sense of it. And I also take a deep breath during the editing process and try to slow myself down again and you know, what rings false, what needs tightened, I write a lot of magazine articles and a magazine journalist too, and that teaches me that every word is vital.
It
So I
is.
try to pare all of that back down too as well. So editing always takes me about, good anywhere from 3 to 6 months if I have the time
Yeah.
to do that much. But I do spend a lot of time.
That's good though. Excuse me, I'm still getting over a silly cold, and I feel like I'm still hoarse, I'm still coughing. I apologize for my hacking, y'all.
I might join you.
Um, but so many aspiring authors today, they just get so wrapped up in the hype of selling a book and making money that they forget that the first calling on a writer's life is as a storyteller. You got to tell the story. And then secondly is to make the story the best it can be. And they just kind of skip over that and they want to pass it off to their friends, and then they have all these different opinions on what they should do with it, and sometimes that can be very overwhelming for an aspiring author. And so I would like to ask you what you would say to an aspiring author watching this program. What would be your best advice? What is something you could tell them that you wish somebody had told you back in the day?
Oh my gosh, I have a lot of a lot of advice, and I would say number one, I would start with don't let fear dictate to you either both in life and in storytelling. I believe that too many artists, especially writers, worry about everything that's not vital to the core of the story that they're telling. We worry about, as you said, Are we going to make money? We worry about if our husband or kids or friends will like the work before it's even finished. Um, we worry if we're on the right track. We worry if we should be writing a thriller, if we're in the midst of women's fiction. We worry about everything that's wrong. And what that does, I believe, is cripples our voice. You know, writers only have, we kind of all tell similar stories in a way,
Yeah.
but they're so unique because of how we're able to bring our voice to that story. That's what makes each book and each author so special. So, you know, knock fear away as best you can, because weird things happen from here to here, and you've
Yes,
got
they
to
do.
get rid of that. And listen, you know, listen to your gut sometimes, no matter what anybody else says or thinks, and that'll take you far. And I do believe, as we've touched on, editing is a huge part of the writing process. And we all work in a variety of ways. You know, I work very differently as a magazine writer or as a journalist when I'm on deadline, because I might have to write a 1,500 word story in an hour, so I edit as I go. I'm a very different editor when I am writing a book. I tend to go by inspiration. I don't care if it's good, bad. Sometimes it isn't even pertinent to the chapter I'm writing. But if it calls to me, I get it down. Then I work it back in, edit it at a later piece. But there is a tendency today, I believe, to rush through a work, to say I'm done. And I always say, if you have a first draft done, sit back down, because you've just started. You know, you've got a
That's true.
lot of work to get done. So those, to me, those are the biggest things, is, you know, whack fear aside and really spend time with your work. I mean, just spend a lot of time. I get sick of my work until it's a good thing if I'm laughing or crying the 100th time at the same passage. That's when I know that it's still working.
That's a very good sign. If you're still laughing and crying at the same point in a story, it means that not only were you able to set it aside and go back to it with fresh eyes and still have the emotional response that you were trying to touch, but you as the author were touched, which is a very difficult task, because we get a little, immune to our own, special sauce.
We do. I like that. I might steal that.
Oh, please. But and every book is different, but every writer's voice is different also. And I'm just now realizing the importance of voice in my writing life. I was one of those, like you were saying, where you just kind of chase the latest thing. Oh, women's fiction's hot. Let's try and write some women's fiction. I've had an identity crisis as a writer personally. I've written everything. I've written romance, YA, fantasy. Now I've got a mystery series going. I've just written everything.
Which, you know what, that's admirable too. That also means, I also think you're probably listening to what you want to write and going after it too, which is a great thing.
Totally. And I think that's important, that, like I said, we're storytellers. And when a story comes to us, whether it's full-blown or not, if it just keeps bothering us, we have to write it.
You're exactly
Nothing
right.
wrong with that.
Like a mosquito. And you're like, get. It is true. You're exactly right. If it continues to call to you and haunt you and refuses to go away, then certainly listen to that. Don't get rid of that.
Yeah. Now I have to ask you about the Charm Bracelet. By the way, I'm going to remind my listeners, this is episode 55. The Charm Bracelet is written under the name of Viola Shipman, which is a pen name for Wade. And are these charms still with you? Do you still have these charms?
I do. I have there's a few. I do. I have my what I call now a combined family charm bracelet. My grandmothers and my mother, who are all passed now, left me all of their charms. I think they knew there was going to be a reason for it. I still have the family bracelet, and I've kind of used them in different ways. This is
how cool.
yeah, I try to wear different things in my own way to honor them and keep that memory alive. And I've always been intrigued by family heirlooms. You know, I have so many things in my house, furniture, family Bible, recipes in a recipe box, quilts, all of these things that meant something to family members, and also, you talk about stories. These items have great stories, not only to me now, but to those I loved, and how they acquired them and what they meant to them over the years. And we tend to throw things aside today, I think. And, I hope and believe the foundational elements of this book are reminding readers of, as I've said, of what's most important. And those are things that have been gifted to us by our elders. And sometimes it's not okay to throw them aside. It's nice to have them out of the attic and with us and living and breathing alongside us every day.
And do you realize, I'm just saying this because it occurred to me as you were speaking, that you are leaving a legacy with this book that is a family heirloom? Have you thought about that?
I haven't until you just said that. I really appreciate that.
You are. I mean, that's one good thing about a writer's life. What they produce in the written form lives on for long after they do. And because you're sharing your family history in this book, it will live on forever. And so you are producing your own legacy by writing this book.
Thank you. I will get emotional today. I've gotten up early, so I'm trying to stay with it.
Well, listen, we're coming down to the last few minutes of the show. It has just been such a joy talking to you, and I really, really want you to come back on the show next year with the next book, because I know it's going to be another entertaining read. But do tell us, everybody listening, where they can find you online and how they can go about getting this wonderful book.
You can find me online at violashipman.com, VIOLASHIPMAN.com, and the book is available everywhere. As they say, everywhere books are sold. It's an April indie next pick by the nation's independent booksellers. So I love my indie bookstores, and it's available everywhere. It's also going to be featured front of store at Barnes & Noble for the next month and a half or so. So it'll be there as well as online anywhere your folks want to pick it up. And I do hope, it's a lovely, sentimental, heartfelt story, and I truly hope those watching really, really enjoy it.
Well, I'm enjoying it already, and I'm going to give you a review, absolutely, because I only review books that I really feel like were worthy of the time that it took to go through them, and really relish them. And so I am going to review that book for you. And I hope that you come for a book signing somewhere close to me so I can come see you in person.
I would love to.
You need to tell your people, say, we need to go south.
I need to go south. It's starting to expand a little more. So I'm hoping over the course of the next year, and I know that I'll be in Texas next year for Kathy Patrick's Pulpwood Queens Festival. So that'll be fun. So I'm starting to get further south.
Well, you need to come down to the Mid-South region, and I promise you we will throw a shindig for you.
We will have a good time, won't we?
We will. Thanks so much for coming by Writer Groupie and visiting with me tonight. And I'm going to close up our show, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Writer Groupie. For booking information, show notes, and more, visit writergroupie.net.